Okay, this video is going to walk you through how to insert minimum and maximum sloped trend lines through our data points and their error bars so that you are able to figure out the uncertainty in the slope. Now, one thing I forgot to do in my last video was to actually show the equation of my trend line, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now real fast. So under trend line, I'm going to say label, use equation. Cool, so that's my equation. Looks like a slope of about 0.195. So we want to know, is there a steeper slope that fits through all my data points in their error bars? And is there a flatter slope that fits through all my data points in their error bars? To do that, we're going to do it visually. So we'll use some individual points, but then we'll be able to kind of adjust them as needed. So to do this, first thing I need to do is create a space to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and next to my average time, I'm going to say min trend line. And next to my next to that, I'm going to say max trend line. Now, what we're going to do is tell Google to plot these the data that we're going to put here as if it was a whole new set of data, but we're really going to just make up that data in order to estimate what the maximum and minimum slope would be. To give you a sense of what we're trying to aim for, this is in the slides, but essentially we can see right here that we have our error bar, or we have our data points, and we have error bars around it, and the blue line is the original trend line, so it kind of goes through the middle mostly of all of those, but we can really fit something as steep as this red line going through all of our data and as flat as this yellow line going through all of our data. So the red line being the maximum trend line, the yellow line being the minimum trend line. Now, things to notice, because it's just easier for you to think of this as a process rather than trying to memorize something. Things to notice is that for the maximum trend line, it should start kind of near the bottom of the error bar for the first data point and go to near the top of the error bar for the last data point. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take that data point, subtract the uncertainty or the error bar size to be its starting point, and for our maximum value over here, or the furthest right on the x-axis, we're going to take that data point and we're going to add the uncertainty, and that should give us kind of the steepest line. If you're confused about that, I will make another video about it eventually, but for now, just go ahead and ask me in class about it or after school. So to insert a minimum trend line, we'll start with the maximum trend line since that's what I talked about. I'm going to take this, it's still going to be this value, so it's still kind of linked there, and this is the furthest left data point. And what I want to do is I want to say, instead of the 0.006, I want it to be at the bottom of that error bar range. So my error bar size, or uncertainty size, was 0.007. So I'm going to say equals, and then I'm going to say this minus 0.007. It's okay that it comes out negative. Next, for the maximum one, I'm going to say it needs to be at the top of the error bar. So I'm going to add my uncertainty to this value. So I'm going to say equals, and this plus 0.007. You always want one of them to be a plus and one of them to be a minus for each trend line. So next thing we're going to do is I need to tell it to graph that data point. So I'm going to go back to my graph over here. I'm going to double click on it. Now under the setup, I can tell it that instead of graphing just the column for, you can peek it through, instead of graphing just the column for H and I, which is what it's saying right now, I actually want it to also graph J and K. So I'm going to change the I to a K, and now it will graph that data too. I'm going to hit enter to update, go to customize, and we can see over here that on our graph, we now have these two little data points. If I were to make this significantly bigger, we can see that that red data point is at the top of the error bar, and we can see that this one is at the bottom. So perfect. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because my screen's big, or not as big. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a trend line for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the data points under the series. So under series, we want to say max trend line. So I'm selecting that one. And then I'm going to, no error bars because it's just a random data point that we're putting in. I'm just going to say trend line, and it needs to be linear. and we need to use the equation. So now we have the equation for our maximum trend line, which looks like the slope is 0.216. So now we want to do that same thing, but with the minimum trend line. And actually, one thing I like to do is reduce the size of that data point to maybe a 2, just so that it's not quite so big and in my face. And we can see if we look very closely that it really does hit kind of the bottom of that trend line, or the bottom of the error bar, and goes to the top of it over here. And it looks like it's passing through most of my data points. The one it looks like it's missing is this one right here. So we can see that the top of the error bar right here doesn't include that red line. So what I'm actually going to do to adjust for that is I'm going to go back, and I'm going to say, instead of this value being 0.150, I'm going to say it's 0.148. So I'm going to reduce it a little bit. We should see, yep, you saw that line drop a little. And so if we go back over here, we can see that now it basically hits that error bar. Ignoring the sideways part, it's hitting the top of it. So this is a manual fit process, meaning that you may have to tweak it and adjust it a little bit so that it actually hits all of your data points, because it just depends on the scatter of your data points. All right, we're going to do that same process, but for minimum. Going back to our image over here, the minimum is going to start near the top of the first data point's error bar, and for the furthest to the right data point, it will go to the bottom of that one. So we're going to start by adding, and then the furthest along we will subtract. So it's the opposite of the max trend line. So for here, I'm going to say equals this plus 0.007, and here I'm going to say this equals this minus 0.007. Cool. So plotted those. I'm going to click on that data point. I'm going to again shrink the size of it to 2 just so it's easier to see what's going on. Let's take a quick check and see. Looks like it's near the top. Good. Let's hit insert a trend line. And so we can see it hits that data point, it hits this one, hits this one, hits this one. Cool. So this is looking like it hits all of our data points and their error bars. And we're able to have it be our minimum slope. I think I may have reversed those. Oh, I was looking at the yellow one again. I apologize. So we have our red one down here. It looks like it's going through our data point there. It looks like it's hitting our data point here and just barely grazing our data point there. So that's our minimum slope. Sorry, I got confused on the colors for this one. Okay, so now that that fits, we're going to say use, so I'm scrolling down. I'm going to say use equation, and so now we can see our minimum trend line is 0.176. That's the red one. You can ignore that bell. Our minimum trend line is 0.176. Our maximum trend line is 0.212. And the kind of best fit was 0.195. So to figure out my uncertainty and slope, I'll take 0.212 minus 0.176 and then divide by 2. And that means that we have an uncertainty of slope of probably somewhere around 0.02 or thereabouts. I haven't done that math, but just guesstimating here. That's it for max and min trend line. This would be the graph that you actually include in your in your report, so that people can see the maximum and minimum trend line. They can see the line of best fit. If you are not able to print in color, it's best if you change the color of the main trend line to something nice and dark, and then you use the other trend lines as a little bit lighter shades of gray or things along those lines, so that it stands out which one is which, and you're better able to see what's going on. That's it for this. I will make some new videos at some point that are more streamlined and focused just on the skills presented in here, but I just wanted to knock out a few, even if they are long, that show you the whole process. Hope it helps.